I am conducting the survey at the MEX, the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, on internationalization of the Japanese educational system. My name is Mori. I know very well Professor Asuka. I understand that you have been studying the Chinese policies, and I understand that there is an academic society to study on the policies in China, and I have been learning on the International Forum in the Asia Pacific. In that context, Rio Plus 20, the new perspectives, that is to say Asian perspectives, if you look from that point of view, the Japanese academia is truly opaque. It is very, very invisible. For the Rio Plus 20, there was a the Rio Plus 20 had a meeting in Japan. But the Japanese academics did not voice anything. Now there was an the meeting of the scientists that tried to provide input to the Rio Plus 20 even before the Rio Plus 20, and Mr. Omi, the former Science and Technology Minister, did say something, but nothing else was contributed from Japan. And now China is in a different political regime from Japan, but when it comes to the climate the policy here or the environmental policy, Japan may not be learning anything, not even from China or not even from Germany. You mentioned about the cap for China. In terms of Asia, does it mean that you will be able to achieve something so that there will be some contribution to the international community in the international debate? Do you think that there may be some positive stance vis-a-vis China?
Thank you very much. Next question, please. Tsukuba University and Nagoya Economics University. I used to work there. My name is Miyazaki. I used to teach at those universities. In Germany and in China and in India, I have questions with regards to the speakers representing those countries. There have been plans that you have explained, and they are plans with great ambition. These are grand plans, but what's the probability of feasibility? That's a separate issue. Speaking of Germany, wind power generation and alternative energy sale and purchase system is not going on well. I've read press reports that that mechanism is not working well. So in order to realize the plans, are you going to be importing electricity from France that relies much on nuclear power generation? That's being put on the table as one option. What's the specific solution for the German situation? And on India and China, private cars are increasing quite rapidly. And how are you trying to regulate the number of private cars? Public transportation system must be developed, especially in India, where there is a major lag in terms of public transport development. How is India planning to resolve that issue? And in Japan and many other countries, there are ongoing campaigns to reduce power consumption, but that's difficult because people are disabled from using electric appliances. Then what do? We end up not being able to reduce emissions. That would mean that the sink has to be increased through significant reforestation or planktons or algae or shell-forming marine animals developed on land, and aquaculture as well. Huge-scale farming may have to be done. What's your idea on that?
Yes, the person in the back.
I'm an intern at the UNU-IAS. My question is for Professor Schurers and Bohr. For the case of, I just want to ask you about MENA plan by Tech. What's the view of Germany and the European Union about this particular project in MENA? And also about Indonesia, I want to ask you about the palm oil biomass in Indonesia. Does it contribute to a CO2 emission reduction in Indonesia in its environmental policy? And if yes, how much can it contribute? And if not, why it doesn't contribute? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And lastly, Mr. Atanasio, please. Yes. こちらの一番前の方です。はい。すいません。時間が限られておりますので。
Since the time is limited, I would like now to close the list. This will be the last question.
A very simple question. Those presentations were very impressive. Obviously, there is a lot of big plans. I was just wondering if anybody had considered if all of these plans were met, who would be doing more? It being a commons problem, every country is going to have tremendous problems meeting its goals, and it's always going to say, well, we're doing a lot, but... So this is known as the comparability of effort problem, and I wondered if anybody wanted to comment on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. それではですね、今。
Thank you very much. We have just heard from 4 questioners, the questions as well as comments. So may I ask the panelists to please respond. So if I may designate the panelists, starting with Dr. Asuka.
すみません、ややこしいの日本語でもいいでしょうか。
So it's a complicated question, so let me respond in Japanese. On the first point on China, and whether the academia and researchers are, how they are positioned in the Chinese context, and whether the research done in China could have a contribution for collective Asia. I'm not sure whether this is a straightforward response, but currently in environmental economics in the United States, most of the students from overseas are from China and South Korea. There are hardly any Japanese students in U.S. universities studying environmental economics. That's the status quo in U.S. colleges. So environmental economics who will be active in international fora will be Asian students excluding Japan. So that's quite regrettable as a professor of the Japanese university. Then, whether Chinese research or Chinese researchers and research projects could have global perspective, I think that's yet to come. Same applies to Japan, but in the relationship between academia and the administration or the government, have they given enough independence, and do they have an independent say? There are still difficulties prevailing in China, so how the academia could overcome that barrier and increase their voice in the Chinese context would also depend on how civil society develops in China. On the second point, with regards to implementation, in China, there are proposals like feed-in tariff, whether that's being done or not, is it possible or not. This is purely my personal view. They're doing more than I had originally expected, because be it FIT, it's like a subsidy in one way or the other, regardless of the fiscal source. If the government wants to promote that industry, it can afford to do so. But if they overdo, then maybe other countries would bring it to the WPO panel that China is dumping. Same for wind power generation. So from the Chinese people's perspective, why are we are overdoing, we are making these over efforts, and then we are criticized by the WTO, but then UN policies praise us for doing. Which pathway should we take? That's a conundrum. And also the comparability on the third point. I've been a researcher for some time. Climate action or mitigation commitment to fairly evaluate and compare is very difficult.